Jake Ludington here at HP Discover with Raf Los, and we're going to talk a little bit about cloud security. What is different about the cloud that makes security a challenge?
Well, I think as I've listened to people talk, both on the show floor back there over the last couple of days and just in general over the last several months and past year or so, I keep hearing people say we need to rethink security for the cloud. And I have to say it's driving me nuts for a number of reasons. One, we do need to rethink security, but it is not because of the cloud. It's because we've been doing security wrong, and the cloud is just simply exacerbating that to a new level. Let me explain what I mean by that. Right? We haven't understood security controls properly, but what I mean by that is we've been building fortresses rather than around our data. We've been building fortresses around our networks, and as we move everything out to the clouds, as we move things to the mobile platforms and all those other kinds of newfangled modern technology buzzwords and things that we can't live without to be an agile business and an instant-on enterprise back there, those fortress mentalities no longer apply. And so, yes, we absolutely have to rethink security for the cloud, but it's because the fact that we've been doing fortress mentality, and there's no fortress. There's nothing to draw a line around anymore, right? We have to go from network-centric security, perimeter-centric security, to data-centric security, role-based security. And the cloud simply, I think, makes that just more evident.
So if we can't just dig a moat and keep people out, what is the solution?
Honestly, I think we need to start with the fact that a lot of developers, when it comes to applications, simply don't understand the difference between authentication and authorization, auth-N, auth-Z. Right? Just because I log into a system doesn't mean I'm authorized to do all the different transactions on it. This is can be extrapolated completely into cloud applications. Just because I can log into a cloud platform or I'm authenticated into a cloud system doesn't mean I have the capability to use all the widgets, all the controls, and all the APIs and all the extended sort of capabilities of a cloud platform, right? So I think that's where it starts. And then really, things like encryption, right? Going into the actual where the data lives and securing data in transit at rest, transactional, and just really looking at the fundamental, going back to basics. Everything's old and security is back to being new again.
So we can't just hash everything out the way that people seem to do when they store data and expect it to be secure?
No, otherwise you're going to get somebody with a CUDA card and 100 terabyte rainbow table that's going to break the cloud. It sounds silly, but no, I mean, it's realistically, we really do need to have a much better strategy than we've had until now. And I think as we move forward and the enterprise starts to become much less defined in terms of a physical space and much more defined in terms of a series of interconnected devices, platforms, applications, it becomes that much more important that we understand where our information is, and the protective strategies that we define around it become that much more that much more defined around the user, around the data, and how we use that data.
There was a reference architecture around security that was announced here at HP Discover in Vienna. How does that play into this improving security for the cloud?
So reference architectures are a baseline really for how do we get started, right? It really helps us to drive some sanity around what makes sense, where do we go. I think even back to sort of my expertise and what I've been up to lately, I've had a lot of conversations with people that simply come to me and ask me, so what is HP doing for cloud security? And I sort of stare at them blankly because I have to ask what part of it, right? Are you doing security in the cloud? Are you doing security for the cloud? Or are you doing security from the cloud? Those are three very different conversations. Are you transforming applications from a data center into a cloud? Or are you maybe putting them on a forklift and shipping them to the cloud? That's, of course, a different story, right? Are you delivering security services from a cloud? These reference architectures that we put together really help people understand and put some kind of sanity around what does all this really mean, and brings it down to things that they can consume and see on paper and understand and start. It's like Legos, right? Start to stack things on top of each other and kind of really get a real idea of what they're doing.
What are some real kind of key point best practices that people should be looking at in the framework of using a reference architecture or just rethinking how they look at security?
best practices, I think I always have to ask best practice for who, but let's just use that term loosely. One of the things I always find really interesting when we're looking at best practices for migrating up to the cloud is, number one, understand that the model you're using for security today is in the data centers doesn't directly translate with what you're going to be using in a cloud-centric environment. So that's probably number one, and having somebody explain that to you and validate that for you. I mean, there is a chance that you've done security right somewhere along the line, and that the firewall isn't what you're relying on for your application security. But the odds are pretty low. I mean, there's not a whole lot of organizations out there, quite honestly, doing it that well. So I think best practice, things that I would point to are understand the migration path, understand the way you're going to transform these applications. So application best practices, the same things we've always looked at though, coding standards, right? You can't just pick up, we call these forklift migrations. You can't just pick an application up out of your data center, zip up the WAR file, upload it to a cloud provider and call it a cloud application, because it's neither going to be more scalable, more available, more elastic, or more secure. It's just not. It's just the same app in a different server, right? So for me, it comes down to understanding. Once you're past the understanding phase, everything else just sort of falls into place, I think.
What about a lot of things that people do that cause them to go down the path of, say, being more secure or being more responsive is driven from like the customer level or the end user level up. Is there anything that customers and end users can do to influence better behavior in the cloud security realm?
Wow. So something interesting on the podcast that I run, there's an attorney I had on that basically told us on the podcast that if we go back to all the software click-through agreements that we signed, if you go back through, I'm paraphrasing, so I may not be completely accurate here, so you have to go back to the podcast and we can quote me there, but if we go back through and all the stuff that's in caps in those click-through agreements, that's all standard, right? So that somebody's vetted that and everybody just sort of copies and pastes that. None of those standard T's and C's are available. There's no such thing for cloud stuff. So as a consumer so I'm assuming you mean consumer by user, right? As a consumer of cloud services, make sure, doubly sure, that you're understanding the liability, the culpability, the responsibility, all the abilities and abilities of your provider, so that you know, quite honestly, what you're getting into. Hold your cloud service provider accountable. I mean, it's huge. It's a big deal. Getting into the fact that just because you're migrating to the cloud doesn't necessarily mean your provider cares about security. We can cite things like, we can cite certain providers that don't even care about uptime. Quite honestly, it's one of those things where read the end user license agreement oddly becomes a real big necessity. Kind of scary, but it's a fact, right? So,
well, I mean, isn't that really just good advice in general, though? Read the end user license agreement, because we all just sort of like zip through, click, and I want to put my credit card in as fast as I can just so I can get on with my day.
Well, that's true, right? I mean, and when we're doing cloud, when we're as you consumers of these services and companies that we work with, I think it's very important that we hold them accountable to the stuff that's in these legal agreements, because when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, as inevitably it will at some point, right? We know systems and fail and hacks happen. Somebody's going to be held accountable. There's going to be an attorney involved somewhere, and you know who's reliable, who's accountable, who's liable, who's going to do the forensics. Are there any forensics to do? And if you don't know these questions ahead of time, the advice I got was allow yourself at least 4 months or so for legals to review your contracts with your vendors. I mean, lots of time, because all these contracts are different. It's not apples to apples, right? There's no standard contract language. It's really kind of scary, but that's kind of why Cloud Security Alliance is around, to try to help bring some kind of sanity to it. That's why HP's got a presence in that. We're trying to, through something like this, we bring cloud customers in, try to bring people to advise us on how they want to consume, how they want to build, give us an idea of how we present it to our customers, so we have an idea of what people expect. Otherwise, we don't know either, right? It's just sort of a shooting in the dark. This is something, somebody decided they want to use one day. Now we got to figure out how to sell it. Fine. but what does that mean? As a vendor, it's not exactly easy either.
What else, if anything, would you want people to know about security as it relates to the cloud?
Just be careful. Security and cloud. Just because I said this earlier. Just because you're migrating up to the cloud, be careful. Look at the abilities, liability, availability, culpability, and then of course the whole idea that we need to rethink security for the cloud. If you have the opportunity to make a decision that you're going to migrate some of your data and your critical applications to the cloud, take the time to do it. Right now is the opportunity, right? Because you've got this modernization capability now. Hopefully you're not doing this overnight because of some crazy need. But now you've got this opportunity to modernize this application, transform it into something from what I can only describe in most organizations as a duct tape and bubble gum over the last 20 years, over the last couple of years, the last couple of months, whatever, to something that is actually designed, built, and thought of for an elastic, more dynamic, more usable, less secure world. And I think that's probably the advice I would give.
Excellent. Well, thanks.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's fun.